It was 3:15 a.m. when the piercing doorbell broke the blissful silence of the night. I was living alone in a 3-bedroom apartment. Lifting my head from my pillow, I froze, trying to think, dreamed that sound, or someone actually called. After a while, the bell rang again. Cursing and muttering to myself, I reluctantly got out of bed and headed towards the front door. In my drowsy state, I reached for the knob with one hand and the latch with the other to push it away. The fact that it was a dark night outside and someone was calling my door was already suspicious, but somehow I wasn't alarmed, because I was eager to deal with the troublemaker and get back to sleep. But I was stopped by a sudden sound. Ringing with his keys, the neighbor opposite unlocked his apartment. I was glad to think it was the neighbor who rang my doorbell. To avoid the boring conversation, I turned around and crawled back into the bedroom, when suddenly there was a wild scream outside the door, belonging to the neighbor opposite. His heartbreaking scream finally woke me up. The scream broke as suddenly as it had started. Fear and curiosity. That's what gripped me in those seconds. On my toes, like a spy, I sneaked up to my door and peered through the peephole. In the stairwell, 3 meters away, my neighbor was lying with twitching limbs, and on it sat a creature, a woman in white, dirty clothes. Her shaggy red hair shook along with her head as she nibbled fast and fast at my poor neighbor's face. It was all accompanied by the unpleasant sound of slurping. The unlikelihood of what was happening gave me an immediate headache, and I took a deep breath and rubbed my eyes, hoping I was imagining things. When I looked into the peephole again, the sound subsided, and the red-headed creature froze. You know, like a dog that just sits there with his jawline when someone tries to steal her food while eating. She turned her head slowly towards my door, and her mouth twisted, wailing cheerfully. It was like she could smell a much more refined treat waiting for her outside my door. I slowly went down. I sank down and, keeping my eyes on the door, began to crawl away until I hit the wall. Something powerful and inhuman began to hit the door, causing plaster to fall over the walls. The door handle shook with incredible speed, and the door seemed to come off the hinges. I, breathing deeply, just sat on the floor and looked at the door. All my skin was shivering, and my hands were trembling. What had happened so far had reminded me of a terrible dream and seemed unreal. Soon the headache became so unbearable that, under the incessant blows at the door, I lost my senses and passed out. I came to my senses when it was already light outside. Someone was calling my door persistently. The moment I woke up and heard the ringing, I was as scared as I was at night. But a moment later I heard voices and knew it was the police. Before I opened it, I asked them a lot of questions to make sure they were really people. No one believed the version I was describing, although the dead neighbor with the face eaten completely justified my story. However, the attacker psychopath is still being sought, and I am now a regular in the psychiatric department. My name is Morgan, and since that night, I've been struggling with an acute mental illness that I never knew existed. Topophobia is the fear of being alone in a room. It so happened that one day I was at home all alone. Then my father worked the night shift and had to return only in the morning. I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time, and I finally had the unparalleled taste of freedom. Nobody would make me do my homework late or help around the house. The whole house was at my disposal, to which I was very happy. Besides, the next day was the day off, which meant I could stay up all night doing my favorite thing. That's what I did, playing my favorite shooter with my friends through Discord. But as much fun as I was then, the organism, accustomed to a clear sleep and waking schedule, by midnight had exhausted all energy. With the last of my strength, I turned off my computer and fell to bed without taking my clothes off. I slept very soundly, but around 4 o'clock in the morning I was awakened by a nasty grinding iron on the glass. With my eyes wide open, I lay motionless for 20 seconds and listened to the whiskey-pressing silence. I finally got up and walked slowly to the window. Not noticing anything unusual, I moved at the same pace to the other rooms, looking around and pondering the source of my awakening. It sounded like something scratching on the glass, and I had no idea where it was coming from until I was in the kitchen. There was a big scratch on the glass balcony door in the moonlight. There was a chill running down my back, which instantly drove out the rest of the sleep. At first, I thought it was a knife scratch and I wanted to turn around to find my cell phone and call the police. But then I looked around and I noticed the main scratch and others, a little smaller. Now it looked as if some animal, like a bear, had clawed at the door. When I came to this conclusion, I calmed down a little and started going around the windows again. Only now I was looking for some animal. After about 10 minutes, I found no one. I finished my search and headed back to the bedroom. When I got to the second floor, I stood there staring at the closed door to my room, clearly realizing that I hadn't closed it. A slight sweat formed on my forehead, and I stood there not knowing what to do next. The only phone in our house at the moment was my cell phone, which was on the nightstand next to my bed. I don't know what came over me, but I wasn't so much scared as curious about who was behind the door. I decided to approach the door as quietly as possible and peek through the keyhole. Smoothly shifting my gaze from right to left, I looked around the room completely and found nothing suspicious. I looked more carefully and noticed that there was someone behind the curtain. Suddenly, from somewhere below, a dark silhouette appeared sharply in front of my eyes. I screamed in surprise and bounced away from the door. At the same second, the doorknob began to jerk with incredible speed. A deafening roar of some creature came from my room. I told myself it was just a bad dream. Probably be over soon. When something started banging on the door and the sound of wood cracking, I ran to the first floor and out of the house without a second thought. The nearest neighbors lived a mile from our house, and for lack of other options, I ran without looking back. Fear lodged deep inside, and with each step, I felt it growing. When I saw a familiar building in the distance and felt the slightest relief, suddenly behind me, I heard the same roar mixed with frequent heavy breathing, which was approaching with frightening speed. Tears flowed from my eyes with fear, sliding down my cheeks because of the wind. Calling loudly for help, I ran like I was running for the last time, squeezing my strength to the max. There was only one thought, one need, one dream in my mind: to be safe. But when the neighbor's house was already 100 meters away from me, I felt something sharp stabbed into my legs, from which I instantly fell to the ground. I screamed even louder, more out of pain, and heard loud gunshots. The creature that had clawed at me was frightened, and with a sharp thrust of its sharp claws, rushed into the forest. From loss of blood, I lost consciousness, and when I woke up, there were instruments beeping and wires stretching all around. I was in a hospital. My father was sitting next to the bed. It was a miracle I survived. Ever since then, I can't even think about staying home alone. The creature that made that shrill roar is still in my mind to this day, even though I have never even seen it. I often like to go out into nature, away from the hustle and bustle of the city, the dirty air and people's misunderstandings. I was lucky because I have a house in a village that lies in the middle of a forest. In the past, it was my favorite place to go on weekends, but now I've changed my mind. After a hard week at work, I decided to go out of town as usual. I picked up some groceries, threw them in the trunk, and hit the road. I arrived in the evening, was tired from the drive, and immediately went to bed. I fell asleep quickly and soundly. The sound of the car alarm woke me up. Well, I thought, maybe an animal ran by. I looked out the window, made sure there were no thieves, and turned off that awful noise. I lay back down and was just about to fall asleep when the alarm started working again. Without getting up, I pressed the button and everything went quiet. But after 5 minutes, the alarm started screaming again. Well, once, okay, twice, but more than that, you start having bad thoughts. A little scared, I still got up, unplugged again, but did not lie down and began to watch through the curtain who decided to play in the middle of the night. I watched, and then I see, behind the light of the lantern in the bushes, began to appear someone's shadow. And the shadow approached the car and showed its shape. Something thin, in a black coat with a hood, about 2 meters tall with long, thin arms, approached the car leisurely, tapped on the wheel, and went back into the bushes. At that moment, I understood that it was time to be afraid. Shaking with fear, I turned off the alarm and continued to watch. Something came out of the bushes, approached the gate, threw an arm over it, and removed the partition that held the gate doors closed. I was gripped with fear. Who is it? What does it want from me? Why doesn't it want to go away? I couldn't move. Goosebumps ran from my head to my heels and back again, sending shivers through my body. My mouth was dry and my mind began to paint frightening pictures in panic. Gritting my teeth and clenching my hands into fists, I came to my senses and ran as fast as I could up the stairs to the first floor. And just as my hand reached for the light switch to find something to protect myself from the guest, I froze. I froze because it was staring out the window. With its hands on the glass, it was looking to see if anyone was home or not. That's when I understood. The whole thing with the car was a lure for the victim to be outside. Why? I didn't want to know, and I still don't want to know. But the fact is the fact. It's here, and it's looking for me. His breath began to fog the window, and I was glad because I couldn't take my eyes off his face. Skin the color of ash, covered with wrinkles. Deep, small, beady black eyes. Instead of a nose, there were 2 holes. His breathing was so heavy and hoarse it made my lungs collapse. There were no lips, just 2 rows of sharp yellow teeth. I couldn't be seen because I was in the back of the house. But it wouldn't just leave. After standing at the window, it went to the door. A knock, and then another. In the gap under the door, I saw it trying to get its fingers under the door. The doorknob started jerking up and down frantically. And the sounds wasn't like a human voice. It was an animal growl. You know when you take a bone away from a dog and it growls in anger? Something like that, only angrier and louder, was coming from the creature. I knew that if it heard me, it wouldn't leave me alone and it would find a way into the house. So I just lay there on the stairs and waited for it to end. Tears started streaming down my face, no matter how hard I tried to hold them back. My temples started pounding so hard it felt like my soul was shaking. I passed out. When I woke up, I looked at the door. The door was still there. I had never been so happy. I got up from the stairs and looked out the window. It was daylight outside the window and the sun was quite high in the sky. Without thinking, I went upstairs, took the keys, and went to the car without packing. As I walked out the door, I saw his footprints on the floor, proof that I wasn't crazy. The broken handle, the scratches on the door, and the boards from the gate lying in the middle of the road also spoke for themselves. I jumped into the car and drove away from the village. On the way, when I turned on the radio, I heard that the bodies of 2 girls had been found in the morning near this village. The bodies had been mutilated and dumped in the swamp. The creature had finally found what it was looking for.